We begin with a Fox News alert. Anchor and executive editor of Special Report Bret Baier will sit down exclusively with Netanyahu following his meeting with President Trump. That interview will air tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's bring in Bret Baier, the executive editor of Special Report, as well as our chief political anchor. Bret, I just want to go to some of the reporting because it had suggested that there was some daylight between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States. That was the reporting, but at least publicly, it doesn't look like there's any daylight.
Yeah, Lawrence, good afternoon. I don't think there is any. They went out of their way, both leaders, to say how close they were. In fact, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announcing that they are going to award President Trump the Israel Award, which has never been given to a non-Israeli, and that was announced over lunch today. Apparently, they've agreed on a lot of the differences that they've had on specifics. They didn't get too far into the weeds there, but had talked about Hamas disarmament, getting to the next step of the peace plan, talked about Iran and giving the green light if they are rebuilding a missile program or a nuclear program, that they may have to be struck again, in President Trump's words. And there was synergy there between President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. So for all the reporting, Lawrence, of this big gap between the two leaders, at least publicly, to your point, it doesn't seem that in this press conference or the one before they sat down.
You know, there is something interesting. We've always had commanders in chiefs that were close to Israel, although some have been critical, at least when it comes to the spending and the public remarks. They have been known as our closest ally. This president looks as them at an ally, but he also looks at himself as being the person that is bridging the Arab world as well as the Jewish people together. Bret, what did you make of that, even when it came down to some of these breakdowns in relationships between Turkey as well as what's happening with Iran? The president kept saying, I'll handle that. They'll get along. Things will be okay.
Yeah, well, he does have personal relationships with all of these leaders. You know, I traveled to the Middle East with President Trump, and I saw the interaction with Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. He has a personal relationship with President Erdogan of Turkey, and that's when he talks about that, despite the fact that Turkey and Israel, when they talk about each other, talk in very different terms. The personal relationship between President Trump and these leaders individually, he says, is going to drive the day, and it may very well. It has served him well in the Abraham Accords, and they are hoping to expand those to include Saudi Arabia. They want to include Syria eventually, and it seems like Bibi Netanyahu is heading down that direction. Obviously, there's criticism that the Trump administration has had of Bibi Netanyahu and how he's operated specifically, but today you did not see that. You didn't see it publicly, and behind closed doors, I'm told, the meetings went very well.
Bret, I want to get your reaction to something else, because the President of the United States, before this meeting yesterday, had a bilateral meeting as well as an intelligence meeting with the President of Ukraine. And you had the opportunity to speak with him. And I found this part of your interview that's going to air later on tonight fascinating. Let's play it.
Do you think you could win or end this war on your terms if the U.S. withdraws support? If they get frustrated in this process and you can't get it across the finish line, can you end this?
If we're speaking, can we win without American support? No. Because we can't. First, we will think about, all the soldiers will think only about their families. And without American support, we can't defend the sky. Even now, it's very difficult. But American support with missiles for air defense, really helpful and strong in any case. Russia uses hundreds, you see hundreds and thousands of drones and missiles. So it's difficult. You know, it's not enough air defense. And on the battlefield, we use some weapon which we buy from America, some rounds, artillery, and etc. from American side. Without it, of course, we can't win.
Bret, the reason why I found that so fascinating, you know, it's obvious that Russia is the aggressor in this, but the president has made it very clear that a deal must be done. And it takes me back to that moment in the Oval Office where the president tells Zelensky, you have no cards. And it seems like Zelensky is finally back to this point now where he's willing to make some sort of concessions.
100%, Lawrence. You know, first of all, President Trump's relationship with President Zelensky has evolved over the years. And that Oval Office meeting was obviously one of the darkest moments of their relationship. But since then, they've had really good talks from both sides as I've listened in. I, believe it or not, have sat down with Zelensky 6 times since the beginning of the war. I've been over there on the front lines. He's been here up in New York at the UN General Assembly. He came here and they reached out. And of course, we said we'd love to sit down. Tonight, you'll see a very optimistic Zelensky, but realistic when it comes to Vladimir Putin. And he is very specific that he thinks they are 90 to 95% there on this 20-point plan, but really is skeptical that Putin wants to get to peace and needs to see the pressure put on Vladimir Putin by President Trump. That said, he talks very positively about his interactions with President Trump. He talks very positively about working with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to try to get this thing across the finish line. But first of all, his English has improved dramatically in the 6 times that I've talked to him. So you're going to see this lay out in English, and we're going to air a lot of this. That'll be the first time that you see him deal with some of the specifics in a way that he really hasn't before.
Well, Bret Baier, you managed to get them all. All the big interviews, they come to one man. And we appreciate you stopping by before your big interview tonight. We appreciate it, Bret.
You bet. Thanks, Lawrence.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.